What up, people? This is your boy Dedrian Colon from House of Wrestling. This is my review for the March 10th episode of Impact Wrestling. Like, share, comment, subscribe, follow House of Wrestling on all social media platforms. Follow me, Dedrian180, on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Tonight's show, I'm not gonna say it was bad, because that would just be wrong and incorrect or anything like that. Anybody who says tonight's show was bad and just it's horrible, they're blown out of proportion. Um, it kind of goes along the lines of what I was discussing the last Impact Wrestling um, review I did. That it feels like after the Mickey James uh, exposure from the Royal Rumble and just that whole situation, and is it going to be a crossover with WWE stars and Impact stars, crossing over and everything, which a lot of fans kind of like blew out of proportion. Um, it just seems like right now they're not regressing. They're not necessarily like progressing at a rapid pace. It's not fair to compare them to WWE or AEW or anything like that, because all three companies are totally different. Even though they produce professional wrestling, each company's different. But it does feel like AEW, Impact Wrestling, is kind of like at a forward. I know it's gonna sound oxymoronic, but it feels like they're in a standstill forward motion. Meaning, and I'm going to try to explain this, is that although the stories are progressing, the tone and the presentation that the stories are being presented feels like it's at a standstill. It feels like almost like we've seen this before. Even though it's somewhat new faces on screen, it just feels like the manner and the tone of the stories feel like it's the same thing that we seen last year. But it was a decent show. I do like the fact that the Motor City Machine Guns are back. That's going to be fun. Let's see what happens if they cross any forbidden doors. That should be fun. I know Alex Shelley, I believe before he took his hiatus, he was appearing on New Japan Strong, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Comment below if he was doing that. But, I mean, it was a decent show. Josh Alexander, from the time that he's taken some time off and everything to handle his contract situation and the visa situation, he's all good and everything. So the show starts with Josh Alexander giving a promo, basically talking about how he wants the title, he wants to go after Moose and get his title, how he was in front of his wife and his kid, and he wants to give something better to his son. And then out comes Eddie Edwards with Honor No More, and again, back and forth banner. This segment, I don't want to say I didn't care too much for, but because there's so much intensity on the side of Honor No More as far as being adamant of proving their point, having a talk segment with those guys and what they've done recently kind of like held them back. Like they kind of like just ran amok on the roster a few weeks before, and it's like now they're just like, oh yeah, we're just Impact Wrestling, even though we tried to beat up everybody in your company. Like, hey, here we are. But no, this segment, it led to Josh Alexander getting beat down by Honor No More, then Heath Slater, Rich Swann, Rhino. I don't remember if it was Willie Mack or anything like that. So they start off fighting. Scott D'Amore comes out and he's like, usually it's a normal day in Impact Wrestling, but today isn't the day. I'm going to schedule. So he schedules Willie Mack and Kitty King, which is a solid first match for the show. But again, you have the tone of the story that's been told for weeks before have been very aggressive, intense, had a lot of grit in it. Just just a lot of physicality, and just having another talk segment, and it's again, this feels like it's a repetitive pattern on Impact Wrestling because we had a similar, um, you had a similar presentation like this with the Impact Women's Championship with Mickie James and Chelsea Green and Tasha Steelz. Like you had even like Deonna Purrazzo, like when she had someone helping her, when you had the Bullet Club and Violent by Design and that whole like you had similar like it's almost like a troupe in Impact Wrestling where someone gives out a promo, then another person comes out, then his group comes, and it's I don't know, it's fun, but yet it just comes across like after it's done so many times and after the length of the disagreement, the promo, and everyone starts fighting. You know, once it starts getting more people involved, then it feels like it loses the logic of like, okay, they're just out here to fight. Like, why would they come out here and fight? Maybe I'm looking into it so much, but for those of you who watch my Impact Wrestling reviews, I'm just giving you what came across. And maybe you're an Impact Wrestling fan, and maybe you have something similar. Maybe you see something different. I don't know. I'll comment below. But yeah, it was a really solid match. Willie Mack won. No one was at ringside. Again, it was a solid match. I wish it would have been presented more, had more significance behind it, maybe higher in the card on the show or anything like that. But for an opening match, it was pretty solid. From there, you get a backstage segment with Scott D'Amore and Moose. Moose is basically saying, why is Josh Alexander getting a title shot? He left the company. You had to make him leave. And Scott D'Amore's like, well, I made him leave so he can refocus on getting that title back. And Moose is like, oh my God. So apparently we're going to get them at Rebellion, which pretty cool. I hope Josh Alexander wins. The guy's been a solid wrestler. He's been a solid hand for Impact Wrestling. And it might be a time for change because let's face it, in the last 2 months, the big story out of Impact has been the Honor No More, Mickie James, and the Bullet Club. That's it. Like, that's had more, I don't want to say significance, but it's been more appealing than the Impact Wrestling World Championship with Moose as champion and Morrissey and those guys. And it's not to knock those guys or anything like, but it's just how it's presented. You know, the Bullet Club, Mickie James, and the Honor No More have been presented in a more appealing way than Moose, Morrissey, and Josh Alexander. Like, it's just like secondary to the stories. And one of the things you don't want to do, especially in a wrestling company, and it's happened before through various promotions, even WWE, is that when you start putting stories, when you start giving more significance to stories over titles, then that title really loses the significance of why people are wrestling for it. You get what I'm saying? Because it just, when you put the story above the title, you're basically saying the reason why these people are fighting is because they want their story to be bigger. Logically, that's how it comes across. It may not be in the creative process of those who are presenting it, but that's how it comes across to the viewer. Then we had a match between John Skyler, Crazy Steve, and Ace Austin. And I tweeted this before. Maybe it's me, but it seems like they continuously put Ace Austin in triple threat matches to compete for the X Division Championship. Maybe it's me. It feels like they did that last year a few times with them. I don't know what it is. Like, again, this seems like a common trope with the Impact Wrestling X Division Championship. They always have these triple threat matches to have someone continue, move on to face the championship in a triple threat match or just what have you. And that's the thing. This was a triple threat match. And apparently at Rebellion, there's going to be Trey Miguel, Ace Austin, and another person in a triple threat match. So it's like a continuous troop. Mind you, the match is good and everything, but it does feel somewhat repetitive with the presentation that they're giving Ace Austin. I would personally like to see him just elevated more. Like, it seems like him and Madman Fulton have been doing the same thing for over a year, having the same type of matches with the same type of opponents. Like, nothing's progressed and nothing's regressed. And that may be a common theme with Impact Wrestling right now. And again, this happened last year when Kenny Omega won the title. Kenny Omega, that whole storyline of him getting the title was interesting, but outside of that, it just felt like there wasn't a regression, but there wasn't a progression. It was just like, this is where we're at. This is where we're at. All right, this is where we're at. And it wasn't like, all right, let's go to that next gear. It's just like, okay, we're here at this next gear with all the notoriety, whether it was Kenny Omega or whether it was Mickie James this year, and the Royal Rumble and the Bullet Club and I don't know more. It's like, okay, we have this gear that we went to. Okay, we need to go to a higher gear. And it's just like, okay, we're at this gear. And okay, we're at this gear. And that's how it's come across with Impact Wrestling. But yeah, Ace Austin wins. So apparently he's going to be with Trey Miguel in a triple threat match at Rebellion. That should be fun. But again, it just feels like Trey Miguel and Ace Austin, these guys are in the same type of match with the same stakes. Like, it's kind of like they're going in circles. It's like a long, big circle, and it comes right back. Same thing. Then you had a backstage segment with Gujar, forgive me, Raj Singh and Larry D. Larry D, if you remember, I believe he wasn't under contract, but maybe he's got a new contract or something like that. He interrupts an interview segment between Raj Singh and Gujar, and he hits Rajin, and Gujar confronts him, and Larry D walks off, and you have this whole segment. I like Gujar, but it just seems like, again, it's a repetitive thing. He had, I believe, a few weeks ago, he had a similar segment with Raj Singh, forgive me, people, and again, the similar thing. He has his backstage segment. He doesn't want to be. It's, again, another repetitive thing. From there, you had a promo from Violent by Design. I like this promo. They basically gave you if you didn't watch this, if you haven't watched Impact Wrestling in a while, and you watch this Violent by Design promo, they basically tell you why they're the world champs and why they did what they did with the Bullet Club, preferably Gallows and Anderson. Makes sense. I loved it. It made sense. It added more depth to why they're the tag team champions, and it really gave you a sense of, okay, these guys are going to take on all challengers, and what are Gallows and Anderson going to do in response to the Violent by Design, Eric Young and Joe Doring winning the Impact Wrestling Tag Team Championships. So what are they going to do? That's going to be interesting. Then we get a 8-woman tag between The Influence, Madison Rayne, and Tenille Dashwood. We get Tasha Steelz, we get Savannah Evans versus Kathy Lee and Jessie McKay, The Inspiration, versus Chelsea Green and Mickie James. This was a solid match. I know many people said this before, and I want to piggyback on it. It really feels like Impact Wrestling should really focus more on the women's division than the men's division, because it really seems like they have more depth and there seems to be more flexibility and more range you can go as far as story presentation with the Knockouts division than you can with the men. That's just my opinion, and that's how it looks. You look at the roster, you look at the depth of the women's roster on Impact Wrestling. They got talent, and these women can wrestle. So I think if they would flip it, where it's like, okay, we're going to focus more on the women's division and just have the men's division like fill in. I know some people might not like that opinion, but that's why I think that's just how I see it. Let's face it, Mickie James got more buzz in the last 2 months than their world champion Moose. That's just facts. It's just how it is. That there you go, right there. But no, this was a really good match. Mickie James, Chelsea Green, Jessie McKay, and Kathy Lee won this match. This match, I recommend you guys watch this match because these women really showcase who they were. And shout out to Savannah Evans, man. She is a good bodyguard / powerhouse for Tasha Steelz. Like, she does a very good job. She doesn't do too much, but she doesn't do too little. She does enough that adds so much to Tasha Steelz, which is like, man, this is really, really cool. And it doesn't feel repetitive as opposed to when you see matches with Ace Austin and Madman Fulton, where it's just like, okay, man, like Impact Wrestling, these guys should be doing more. These guys should be doing more. These guys should be doing more. And it's just like, okay, it's been over a year, 2 years, like, you know, they should be doing more. From there, we get a promo from Jonah. This was really cool. One line that sticks out, he's like, I'm not afraid of monsters. Monsters are afraid of me. Love that. Another good promo. This and Violent by Design really added more depth and layers to what they're currently doing. And it's just like, okay. I want to see more of what Jonah's going to do. And me personally, I'm a fan of Jonah. I was a fan of Jonah back in NXT when he was Bronson Reed. This guy is a powerhouse. Again, it seems like he's in a repetitive cycle as far as fighting these matches where he has this battle and then he just squashes someone. So it's just like, okay, are you going to elevate him to the world title scene, or are you just going to keep him there? Me personally, I would like it. It'd be cool if they put him in the X division. Like, have someone try to beat him. Similar to Samoa Joe when Samoa Joe was in the X division. That was sweet. From there, we had the promo of the Bullet Club, Jay White, Chris Bay, the Good Brothers. They're basically talking about, what happened. Good Brothers like, you know what, we're going to get our titles back. And Jay White goes into him defeating Alex Shelley, his former trainer. And he's like, guy thought he had me. He didn't have me. And Alex Shelley comes out. And I love this promo. Again, this is the third thing. Let's see. Violent by Design promo, Jonah's promo, the women's match, and this Bullet Club promo was really good because Alex Shelley's promo, he basically gave you a history of the relationship between him and Jay White, and basically kind of gave us I don't want to say a hint, but just something to keep an eye on, that every place that Jay White goes, like, Alex Shelley has had a hand in those places or those people that work in those places. He mentioned they mentioned the Briscoes, Ring of Honor, the Dojo, AEW, the Young Bucks. I recommend you guys watch it. So he's giving you a history lesson, and Jay White and those guys are like, you know what? How about next week? Or actually, it was the other way around. So they're teasing, like, how are you going to, it's one of you and four, but like, how are you going to do this? And I love this because out comes Chris Sabin. Chris Sabin, yes. Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, they're back together. Motor City Machine Guns. And next week on Impact Wrestling, you're going to have Jay White and Chris Bay of the Bullet Club versus Chris Bay and Alex Shelley, the Motor City Machine Guns. I am happy for it. It's been a long time coming. I know Alex Shelley, the past few years, he was took a sabbatical, I believe, to get a degree or something. Maybe I'm wrong. Forgive me. Comment below if he did that. And, of course, he was dealing with an injury. But now they're back together. I love it. This is going to be a fun match because, the Motor City Machine Guns can go, especially with their matches with the Young Bucks and the stuff that they did in Ring of Honor and Impact Wrestling. Jay White and Chris Bay can go. So that's going to be a match that, if you are an Impact Wrestling fan, if you are a New Japan fan, and if you are a Motor City Machine Guns fan, you want to watch that match next week. I'm definitely going to watch it and I'm going to enjoy it. From there, we had a backstage segment with Josh Alexander and Scott D'Amore. Basically tells him like there is a reason why I sent you home because I knew that you were close to the headquarters, so I wanted you to get your contract situation taken care of, and of course focus on Moose, and left it at that. Then we got a backstage segment with Deonna Purrazzo. She's talking about her championships, and again, it's a common theme. How many times have we seen the champion back and someone interrupts and then it turns into either a match or then someone else interrupts and now we got a triple threat match? This is a common trope in Impact Wrestling. And why do I say that? Because this was pretty much identical to what happened last week with Giselle Shaw and Lady Frost. Of course, last week you had Lady Frost and Giselle Shaw have a match. This week, Giselle Shaw wants to fight Deonna Purrazzo for both titles, and they're like, you know what? It's going to be a triple threat. So, yeah, next week we're going to get a triple threat between Deonna Purrazzo, Giselle Shaw, and Lady Frost, which should be a very good match. But again, my issue is how Impact Wrestling is presenting these wrestlers and these storylines it's kind of a borderline repetitive trope where it's like, okay, the champion's going to be backstage, someone's going to interrupt. Just freshen it up, progress it more, like take it to another level. But no, that match should be really good. Lady Frost, she can go. Giselle Shaw, she can go. Deonna Purrazzo, we know she can go. So that's another match that's going to be really good. Man, you're going to have Jay White, Chris Bay, and the Motor City Machine Guns taking on in a tag team match. And then you're going to have this triple threat between Giselle Shaw, Lady Frost, and Deonna Purrazzo. Going to be a really good week from Impact Wrestling. Then the main event, you had Eddie Edwards versus Rich Swann. And it was a decent match. It's sad that Rich Swann, man, that's what I'm going to bring up. Like, Rich Swann last year was a Impact Wrestling World Champion, and they have him in a spot where he's in a tag team, yet in a faction, and he's not in the main event picture anymore. I'm disappointed by that. But no, this match was pretty solid. Eddie Edwards and those guys pretty much came out with the victory. But again, my takeaway from this whole Impact Wrestling show is that it seems like, and I've stated this before, and I'm like, okay, it feels like they're going back to that old bad habit of you're not regressing and you're not really progressing. You're just there. Again, like I stated last week on last week's show, and even Sacrifice. If you take away the Mickie James buzz, if you take away the Bullet Club stuff, if you take away Honor No More stuff, it really feels like we're watching the same episode of Impact every week. And it's not good for the guys, the men and the women there. Again, I'm not criticizing the wrestlers, but it's more the creative and the presentation that they're putting these wrestlers in that, honestly, this show, with the exception of the women's match, the Violent by Design promo, the Bullet Club promo, Jonas promo, and maybe main event was okay, but outside of that, I mean, this show was pretty, like, you could catch either on a replay or read the results. That's just how it was. There's nothing else I could say or change. It's just that's how it came across, and I don't know. Next week should be a lot better, but this show really, it was just like, okay, nothing's progressing. The matches were okay, but not like, oh damn, this is a really good match. I don't know. It's kind of disappointing because they do have a roster that can throw some bangers, and it just felt like they created a show that really didn't have that 1 or 2 matches that they've normally had in weeks past. Sometimes 3 matches where you're just like, man, you got to watch this match. Man, that was an awesome match. Man, this was a dope match. It just felt really repetitive and just a lot of Impact Wrestling tropes coming back to the surface. And it's just like, okay, we got to change things up. Like, how many times you're going to put, like I said before earlier in this video, how many times you're going to have Ace Austin in an X Division match, more so a triple threat match to compete to fight Trey Miguel for the X Division title. Like, that's happened numerous of times in the last year. The backstage segment with Deonna Purrazzo and whoever's going after championships. We've seen that before when she had the Impact, the Knockouts Women's Championship. People come and interrupt, and then another person interrupt, and it's a triple threat match. Like, we've seen that before. I think a lot of fans, and including myself, who enjoy Impact Wrestling, like, we want to see their stories go to another level instead of the same repetitive tropes that we've seen the past few years. And tonight was obvious. Like, a lot of Impact Wrestling tropes were evident tonight. It was a good show. I wouldn't say, oh my God, it was amazing, but it was like, all right. And again, this is not knocking the wrestlers, but it is addressing how creative is presenting these wrestlers in Impact Wrestling on TV and just how it's coming across to viewers and fans. And I don't know. I hope next week is good. I'm looking forward to the Jay White, Chris Bay, Motor City Machine Guns match, and of course the triple threat between Deonna Purrazzo and Giselle Shaw and Lady Frost. I'm looking forward to those matches, but outside of that, like, there has to be more grit, more intensity, and just more creativity. And hopefully they do it. Again, last year they kind of went through the same trope, even though they didn't have fans in the arena. But it's the same thing they did going into the summer, where it was just like, oh, we're here again. And it's just like, it's almost like they hit these limits of their creativity and just stay there. And then it just stays there. And then, we got another limit. And it just stays there. It doesn't boom, 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 boom. Like, it doesn't go to level. It just doesn't feel like when, like, for instance, Ace Austin. And I love his matches and everything, but it just feels like the creative they put him in particular, using him as an example, it just doesn't, it's just here. Like, there's no regression and there's no progression. And I think the good thing is Impact Wrestling isn't regressing, but it should be more progressing. And hopefully they, in the next coming weeks, especially with Rebellion coming around the corner, that it just goes to another level. But that is my review for the March 10th episode of Impact Wrestling. Like, share, comment, subscribe, follow House of Wrestling on all social media platforms. Follow me, Dedrian180, on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Let's see what happens. So with that, like I always say, stop fighting over wrestling. Enjoy wrestling. We got a whole bunch of stuff happening the next month or two with so many wrestling companies. Enjoy it. Why fight? Just choose something. It's like a buffet. If you don't like this, go over here. You have a choice. All right. I always have to end every video with that. So with that, until next time,